子上手だったね。
違う。あいつはオリビアだ。
Personally, I always preferred Hanako over Olivier, though Kasumi did have her moments too. We opened up this week, surprisingly enough, at the same place that the Foreclosure Task Force were at last week. Can't say I expected these shows to have this sort of connection, but hey, as someone who actually likes aquariums, I do appreciate it. But yeah, having seen Gemba win over a wild animal car like Safari last week, Ishiro was feeling a little insecure and wanted to win over the other sentient car that Tai had created, Marine. Now, of course, that does sound like a rather trivial matter to get upset over. I mean, if they can all use the cars interchangeably, then what's the big deal of who awakens what first? Well, for Isho, it was a surprisingly complex issue that wasn't just him being a stereotypical loner. Though before that, we also had to check in on our villains, who, after all they've been through, they did deserve a bit of a break. However, their raspy voiced boss wasn't going to allow it. Say, can I get that pillow if you're not going to use it? I mean, it's probably the closest thing I can get to an anime buy pillow without getting any weird looks. Not that I would know anything about that. Anyway, they turned a refrigerator into a monster of the week that had a bit of a familiar voice. Like, personally, I think the first time I ever heard this guy was as Bemi from Maji Ranger, but looking him up, on top of playing the OG Artemis, he also played a lot of Sentai villains, both minor and major, though I'm gonna guess he was mostly a toy to maybe play a certain returning character for a sequel coming out very soon. Just saying, Yamo was legit one of the more interesting characters in that show. Anyway, I think Cannonborg had actually listened to what I said last week and provided his underlings with a rebuilt robot. Back with Ishiro, he had met with Mira, who also happened to be working part-time at the aquarium on top of all of her other jobs, because apparently the show is also a commentary on Japan's currently struggling economy. But yeah, after an actual seal performance that they took for the show, and was legit impressive, Ishiro opened up to his teammate about how the sea animals got him through some slightly difficult times while he was a gun for hire. Yeah, the show's actually bringing up the subject of animal-assisted therapy that's often been provided to people who have mild to severe mental issues. It could range from people on the autism spectrum, though I was never an animal person myself, to people with PTSD, which, yeah, as someone who is pretty much Lloyd Forger minus the loving family, Ishiro kind of needed, though whatever private organizations he was working for before becoming a Boonboomger weren't just going to provide it for him. Thus, after he met Taya and could ease up a little, he found salvation amongst the little critters that he couldn't touch, but still find a tranquil connection with. I mean, again, this show hasn't been King Oja levels of complex, and yet humanizing moments like this hit all the more for it. Though, of course, we can't just forget that this is a superhero show, so the Monster of the Week arrived, and I'm pretty sure offed a few dozen people here, unless Sabiko is just not a thing anymore. Regardless, this did lead into an interesting little setup, as the generals had arrived in their new Boom Boom Killer Robo that had also gotten its own edgy armaments now. As a result, the Boonboomger needed to split up, with the team sans Ishiro fighting their evil knockoff, while the Blue Sentai dealt with Yamo on his own. And as we often say on this channel, it is just cool to see the heroes fight on multiple fronts, and in this case, it had the additional benefit of some good story reasoning behind it, with Ishiro of course wanting to protect his place of therapy and rehabilitation. However, and while he was able to take care of the grunts, I guess he was lacking in that whole red privilege, and he ended up losing to the runaway fridge. At the same time, the rest of his team was struggling with their own fight, but not enough that Mira couldn't slip out to help out her teammate. Gimba, why did you pull that out of your pants?
Don't ask! For God's sakes, don't ask!
Well, it didn't really matter, as the innocent Pink didn't know how to use the ropes of bonding properly, which pretty much left the monster disappointed, judging by the sounds he was making. Still, it was enough to let the two Sentai escape, and have a legit pretty strong moment where Mira gave Ishiro a good talking to over not needlessly putting himself in so much danger, and that he should try to rely on others more. Hell, in a way, maybe that's something he actually longed for this whole time, as while he did find some comfort in talking to Nemo all the damn time, he also did need some actual human companionship. Thus the two performed one of the best transformation sequences in this show. Like seriously, that is a very clever way of using your toys. Same could kind of apply to how they approached the fight this week, with the two basically performing ice skate to get around Yamo freezing the ground. Though they also kind of forced a connection with the aquarium by saying that this was modeled after how the fish move, which, yeah, doesn't seem quite on the mark, but whatever, them flying around like seals was actually kind of clever. And yeah, while it looked a little silly, especially with that CGI, it was the kind of silly fun that I do enjoy, mostly because they also played the show's opening theme as an insert song here, which is also way in my book, as long as they don't overdo it. And as a nice change up, we didn't have a chase this week, as they didn't have a giant monster this week, when they already had a giant robot enemy to fight. This also gave them an opportunity to introduce the new toy, of course, as Ishiro's power of Nakama awakened Marine. This led into a new combination with Safari, resulting in Boonboomger. Yep, Ash Ketchum became a Pokemon again. Anyway, the remainder of the fight was short, but again, I'm kind of a sucker for this excessive usage of sparks, and throwing around the killer robo with mostly practical effects is legit impressive. Thus, the Boonboomger defeated their evil clone and sent the baddies blasting off again. And with that, the episode ended with them welcoming their newest member, especially Ishiro, who might have come off a little too strong. Then again, at least he's not quite as bad as Mayu. This episode was one of the stronger character pieces that just kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, not to say that the other spotlights haven't done a good job with the other characters, but this one really showed an interesting yet vulnerable side to a character archetype that's usually meant to be cool, and yet here, they showed how difficult it is to keep up that facade. For me, Joe is still my favorite, but after this episode, I would say Ishio is kind of catching up. While I obviously don't know how well this episode approached animal therapy, or hell, if that was even their actual intention, I still think they did a great job showing Ishiro's struggles as a former spy. Through just some great visual storytelling, we could clearly see how he had developed crippling PTSD that led him to have trust issues with others, aside from those who comforted him. In this case, it was both his very close friend in Taya and innocent marine life. Thus, him trying to win the favor of a sentient card named Marine also likely acted as a means of therapy for him. It's surprisingly deep writing that's not spelled out, but you can still pick up on how much this stuff meant to Ishiro. And yet, for anyone trying to recover from psychological issues, it is also a good idea to have actual human companionship beyond just one guy, which Mira was able to provide with this episode, also acting as a good mini spotlight for her and her amicable attitude towards her team. Good stuff that was complemented by the superhero stuff too. The Boom Boom Killer is still an interesting concept that they'll likely keep bringing back, with Cannonborg making some improvements each time. Granted, it has been defeated a little too easily for these past two episodes, but maybe that'll change by the end of this arc. And even then, the ice game fight was a lot of fun, and overall, this is one of the stronger episodes of the second arc of this series. Ishiro might still need to learn how to talk to creatures besides fish, but hey, at least he's not as bad as Kagami.
I can see talking to dogs and cats that way, but a fish? That's something only a lonely, desperate...
Since we are just about done with it, the second part of the Max Heart review will be coming out this week in place of the usual Wednesday review. Yes, we know some of y'all were waiting for these reviews to continue, so we will oblige. Plus, we do kind of want to move on to our next side project after the announcement of a certain series getting a sequel. We're just going to keep what we're going to review for it a surprise, but believe me, I think we found something real good. So, do look forward to it. Until then though, farewell for now, my friends, and... oh, here we go again. Alright, let's see. Ooh, a salmon head this time. I can make some soup out of that.